I remember my very first memory of River City Labs was walking into the space at 282 Wickham. And the first impression was actually, man, this place is pretty grotty. This is pretty terrible. But then once you meet the people, you realize the absolute value of the space. The very first people I met were incredible, genuine ecosystem leaders. Like just this sense of community and giving came through. And then you actually started talking to the founders that were in the space as well, and you realize that there was some amazing stuff happening out of River City Labs.
So I remember talking to Steve Baxter when he had the idea of a startup co-working space in Brisbane. And at the time I was the CEO of the iLab incubator, and the startup scene in Brisbane was almost non-existent. And Steve showed up and said, I have this idea that there needs to be a co-working space for startups. And I remember at the time he was absolutely passionate about doing it. He was looking for validation, which is a great startup attribute, but he knew it needed to happen, and he was past the point of would this be a good idea. It was how do we make sure it's successful.
So we have always focused on founders, what it is that they need, and made sure we deliver that in a steady stream of activity, whether it be programs, events, support. We made sure it's like a tap, it's always flowing. There has never been any lull of activity from River City Labs. The event calendar is insane. So at any point, if anyone wants to get involved, there's something to attend. So that's, it creates the momentum.
I think the River City Labs has impacted the ecosystem perfectly, and also in a massive way, but probably not as big as everybody else thinks, right? So there's a real temptation to think that there was nothing here before this, and there wasn't nothing. I mean, it was floundering a bit, it was struggling a bit. I mean, iLab had been through a few iterations, there were a lot of people doing it. I mean, we were ostensibly in the startup community, but we didn't know we were in the startup community. There was a lack of engagement across the board, and Steve's deliberate intent was to create the clubhouse at which everybody would come in and play.
Yeah, so the first time I went to River City Labs was 2 years ago. It was for an event. I knew nothing about the place. I had no idea what was going on. And someone said, you need to do the next startup weekend. This is so your kind of crowd. I did the startup weekend. I had no idea what I was walking into. Someone was like, oh my gosh, Steve's here. And I'm like, who's Steve? From Shark Tank. What's Shark Tank? And I kept coming along, and 2 years later, here I am still in this community, still in this ecosystem. Look, you'll find out very, very quickly if it's not your thing, but if it is your thing, there's no way you're gonna find out in another place. In corporate, you're not gonna suddenly be like, wow, I should be part of a startup community. It's only by being part of a startup community that you go, this is my crowd, this is my tribe, this is where I'm meant to be.
Some of the most interesting parts is when you saw it at the end, how busy and crazy that it was getting. We often had days where we were the only people there, and this was just in the middle of the day. We pretty much had the place to ourselves. So it was just that evolution there of seeing it going from completely empty. And sometimes you talk a bit too loud and you go, this is really empty space, we're going everywhere. And then moving on to the point that it was, like by the time we moved out, they had people waiting for desks, and that's obviously why they moved here. So I think it makes it a lot more discoverable. Like the fact that there's a lot of people congregating in the same place as opposed to being scattered in buildings everywhere, a couple of people in one uni, a couple of people in another, random office space here and there, it's a lot harder to focus. So having it that everyone's congregating in one point, there's one central place, and probably a lot of companies getting up with some shared history through here as well.
So I don't really know about River City Labs until Startup Catalyst in 2014. And then I kind of went from knowing nothing about River City Labs to knowing absolutely everything at once. And it's that ecosystem that's kind of changed where I spent my life. So I went from corporate world and corporate life to now running doing some of the most exciting work I've ever done in my life, and working something cool. I can genuinely say that we wouldn't be here if it was not for the tears, pain, effort, money, everything that's Steve and all the other people have put in.
We need to create an amazing network, a deep series of networks with mentors and investors and people and great advisors who give back. To weed concept, we need to be able to, I call it a snowball. We need to kick the snowball down the hill and get it rolling. At the moment, we've almost got it towards the edge. It's not quite rolling yet, it's not quite big enough. We've got a lot of work still, and it's always going to be 5 years away.